Chapter 11. As we soon discovered, having a tent home in San Francisco was like living atop an anthill that kept having more ants. Each day, hundreds of new people arrived in San Francisco. During our first weeks in the city, 200 more ships arrived and disgorged their passengers. The vessels were thus added to the fleet called Rotten Row. Daily, 15 to 30 so-called homes were put up in the city, with people moving into them all but instantly. There were never enough new homes. Nor was there, while most indelicate, it must be said, any sanitation. Waste was disposed of upon the sandy hills or in the bay. The city stank. We used an earthenware chamber pot. I don't wish to say more. At the beginning of the year 1849, the city contained less than 2,000 citizens. By the time we arrived, there were something like 15,000. Gold was the magnet for these souls. It reminded me of the saying, where industry walks, greed gallops. Many a newcomer barely came to shore but rushed off in search of gold down bay to what they called the diggings. These people called themselves Argonauts, after those who sought the golden fleece in ancient Greece. To my mind, these California newcomers were being fleeced. I refused to be. I took it upon myself to purchase food, only to discover prices were extraordinarily high. For one egg, $1. A potato cost 75 cents. Water, $1 a bucket. What's more, as we quickly learned, there was no easy access to water. We had to fetch it, buy it, and then haul it back to our tent, uphill. All this meant that I soon came to understand that Father had insufficient money for our needs. That led to the further realization that I must secure some money, which is to say, I needed to find work. As you know, I had worked discreet ladies' work in Providence. Would I, a girl in San Francisco, even be able to find, and what's more be allowed to undertake, employment? As it happened, because so many men were at the diggings, laborers were scarce. That meant it turned out to be easy for me to secure some work. I may have been a tall and skinny girl, but I was strong, and most of all willing to learn. I had done it before. As long as I could do the tasks required, nobody minded who I was. There was one major problem. My clothing, my girls' clothing, skirts, blouses, and bonnets, made it difficult to work, and they became constantly dirtied. Washing was, at best, a gross challenge, expensive and endlessly time-consuming. No wonder so many San Francisco men were filthy. From the moment I put my foot on California soil, I too was soiled. Since I had been raised with one of Aunt Lavinia's favorite maxims, cleanliness is next to godliness, this was hard. I was forced to make the decision. I would have to dress in men's garb. Being so clothed would make it easier to work, and easier to keep somewhat clean. Not truly clean, somewhat clean. I therefore purchased baggy corduroy trousers and flannel shirts at Howard & Mellis, a large dry goods store by the Cove. This clothing allowed me to get through deep mud, while saving hours of washing chores. It had nothing to do with hiding who I was. It merely allowed me to labor. Another thing, during my first days in the city when I walked about in my girl's dress, many a miner approached and rudely asked me to marry him. You may be sure it wasn't love that brought these proposals, but, I realized, a desire to have a servant. My man's costume put an end to such absurd insults. I also kept my hair in one long braid, taking my style from Chinese men. So it was that within a week of our arrival I was pushing wheelbarrows through deep mud. I learned to row, about which more later, a borrowed rowboat to help unload newly arrived ships and bring luggage and passengers to land. It paid well, though it did give me, at first, hand blisters. I also helped carpenters or newcomers put up frame houses and cover them with canvas, cotton, or paper. This is to say, I put my hands to whatever paid me. By doing so, I made as much as $10 a day or more, 10 times more than I had earned in Providence. Oddly enough, the men for whom I worked paid me with grains of gold, not coin, because there wasn't much real money around. That made me smile. Here was father about to seek gold at the diggings, while I was already acquiring gold by working in the city. I had more wealth than I ever thought possible, much more than father had at that point. All of this enhanced my sense of freedom. Doing what was required meant I grew physically and mentally stronger every day, while onerous tasks became easier. Here was a new kind of spirited life, a new me. Could any heroine ask for more? Was this difficult? To be sure. You may believe I was truly required to live the notion. I would rather be happy than dignified. Let it be admitted I had little dignity. Let it also be said that I enjoyed the independence. I think my working and my way of dressing was an embarrassment to father. No doubt he barely recognized me. Well, then, we hardly recognized him. He started to dress like a miner, complete with red flannel shirt, slouch hat, and boots. He even grew a beard. He spent all his time learning what he must do and where to go while purchasing the tools he needed for the diggings. Father, the most placid of men, now had a bowie knife in his belt. I doubt he ever used it. In Providence, before he lost his position, he had been, as I previously described him, a careful, non-adventurous man. Announcing that he was now merely days and a little effort away from acquiring colossal wealth, he thought only of gold. This was not unusual. If gold fever was an illness on the East Coast, in San Francisco it was a universal plague. Beyond all else, father, who had been a most thoughtful if restrictive parent, now showed us, his children, almost no attention at all. For the most part he left us alone, telling us he was looking for servants and a school for Jacob. In all of this only Jacob stayed the same. Whereas I had begun to work, Jacob was now at a loss as what to do. First he tried to follow father about. Father shooed him away. Then he tried to join me where I was working. That, too, proved impossible. As a result, he wandered aimlessly, though never far from our tent. It was painfully clear that Jacob much preferred to be taken care of. Not wishing to make choices for himself, not willing to bestir himself. I was struck with the truth that as a sister grows older, her brother seems to grow younger. The most useful thing Jacob did was befriend our across-the-way neighbor, Señor Rosales. The good man was ever patient as Jacob chattered and tried to help. As for me, Señor Rosales called me Corderita, which I understood to mean little lamb. A few days before father headed for the diggings, we sat in the tent around the box that was our table, the sole light coming from a small, solitary, and smoky candle. As we ate our dinner of slab beef, which I had cooked outside over a fire, father abruptly turned to me and said, "Torry, I trust you understand. When I leave, it's all well and good that you are working, but your chief responsibility is to take care of Jacob." Taken by surprise, I echoed, "Chief?" "Of course. You are his sister, 4 years older than he. That makes you in charge. I have tried to hire a servant. None are to be had at the wages we paid back east. And I'm afraid to say there seems to be no school here." Let it be said, the notion that henceforward I was to be the sole person responsible for Jacob was hardly pleasing to me. Once again this was not what I had envisioned in coming west. Jacob's angry face made it clear this was not what he desired either. He argued with father, begging him to let us go to the goldfields with him. Father refused. "I'm depending on you," father continued, saying to me, "to take care of your brother. Mother is depending on it. Is that understood?" No doubt I nodded, but I was thinking not about Jacob, but myself. Here I was, a 14-year-old girl who had just begun to enjoy full freedom. Though Jacob surely was my dear brother, I cannot say I wanted to engage my time being a nursemaid to him. Yet I had to acknowledge this was, in part, my own doing. If I had not come to San Francisco, surely father would have taken Jacob with him. There was nothing I could say. Even so, with father about to leave us alone in San Francisco, I made an important decision. I would not give up my new life for my brother.